We're in part 3 of our message series called Modern Family, and we're wrestling with and talking about how to create a Jesus-centered home. And maybe some of those sentiments in that video, something that you have experienced or felt before. But we're trying to ask this question: how is my faith lived out in my family life? How does my relationship with Christ translate and practically affect my family's values and our vision and our attitude and behaviors towards one another, and towards those outside of the family? How does all this work in a family context? So in part 1, a couple weeks ago of our series, we established that there's this ideal that we're all striving for when it comes to family. But since none of us are from ideal families, we all come from broken families, we haven't created the ideal family. So, when it comes to family, there's this tension between the real and the ideal, between the ideal of what we believe God has established family to be and what many of us want in our hearts. There's a tension between that and the real, our daily reality life, where we just fall short of that ideal. But resolving the tension between the real and the ideal means that you lose the power of the gospel. If you just say, oh, forget the ideal, let's just make it non-existent, let's just call whatever it is that we're in, let's just call that normal. If you just try to resolve the tension, you lose the power of the gospel, that Jesus is both grace and truth, that he is both the ideal and with us in the real. He has grace on us, but he also calls us to live according to his truth. He gave his life willingly because he wasn't willing to give up the ideal, the truth. He wasn't willing to just erase it, so he had to give his life. But he also wasn't willing to watch his beloved creation be lost forever because they fell short of God's standard of righteousness. That's called grace. Grace reaching down to you and I. Then last time in part 2, we built on this idea and we talked about mutual submission and how it's the role of each member of the family to submit to one another. Submit meaning to come under the mission of each other as God leads us, both as an individual and as a family. It's not just one person having total control and someone else just committing to blind obedience. That's not a biblical model. It's really a heart issue. It has to start in the heart. And it results in things like service, mutual service to one another, and humility. So, practically speaking, mutual submission has us simply asking the question in our families, if you remember from last time, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And hopefully you take that question and you've tried it out at home. If everybody in the family asks that question to each other, how would the dynamic of our families change? So I encourage you to try it out. And if you do, please let me know. Let me know what happens and if anything results from that. Also, back in part 1, we identified something that we all have in common. It's the fact that none of us chose our families. We were all just born into them. But we actually have something else in common when it comes to family, and this is what I want to talk about today. We all have to deal with conflict in our families. Right? Right? We all have to deal with conflict. Everybody's being quiet. Like, no, I don't want to admit it. My family's here. I don't want to say anything. We all have to deal with conflict. We fuss and we fight and we get angry and we argue over really big things, over really little things, and if we're honest, really silly things. Right? Especially if you're married or dating somebody or engaged, you know about those silly things. Family relationships are tough because they're so complicated and they're so emotional. Conflict in a family is less like a movie, like it has a beginning and a middle and an end, and it's over in about 2 hours and everything worked out. It's not really like that in a family. It's more like a TV show with never-ending seasons. Season 42, right? You got never-ending drama. So no matter what season you're in, it's mostly the same characters with the same problems, just in different circumstances. Isn't that how shows work? So where does this kind of conflict, where does conflict like this come from? What's its source? Well, today we're going to look at one main passage of Scripture from James chapter 4. If you have a Bible, you can turn there. It'll be on the screen as well. And James chapter 4 is going to show us the root of our relational conflict. And I believe that if we take what the Apostle James says and we take it to heart and we apply it to our lives, we'll not only be moving Jesus closer to the center of our homes, but we'll see the conflict and the tension in our homes decrease and go down. Then hopefully others will see it too. And the light of Christ will shine brighter through us and our families. So we have the Apostle James, who was Jesus' little brother, and he was a major leader in the early church, along with guys like Peter and John and Paul. And he wrote this really blunt, like no-nonsense letter to Christian Jews who were scattered all over the world in that day about how to live out a true faith in Christ. And since he was Jesus' little brother, he had seen it all. He wasn't impressed by our religious activities. And so if you read the book of James, which we did just finish the Bible study on, he really takes the gloves off and just gives it to us straight. He's very direct. And so he wrote this letter, and then centuries ago, the church started naming it, and we called it the epistle or the letter of James, or the book of James, and then we added chapter markers and verses so that we can reference things easier. And as we see in a lot of books in the New Testament, there's two aspects. There's the horizontal aspect that deals with maintaining relationships with one another, and then there's this vertical aspect that deals with cultivating a healthy relationship with God, and James deals with both. But he begins chapter 4, where we're going to start today, with a difficult question about our horizontal relationships with one another. So look at James 4, verse 1, and we'll just look at the very first part of that verse. He simply asks, what causes fights and quarrels among you? What causes fights and quarrels among you? Now, if we ask this question in a family context, most of us would probably look at someone in our family and say, you do. You cause fights and quarrels among us. Basically, we blame each other. Well, my husband, he won't open up to me, or, my kids won't listen to me, or my wife keeps nagging me about everything. Our fingers would be pointed outward. It's you. But look at what James says causes conflict. The rest of that verse. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? In other words, doesn't relational conflict come from something that's inside of you? Wait, what? No, James, that doesn't sound right. Right? We think that fights and arguments happen because of something inside of them. But James says it's because of something happening inside of me. I have a desire in me that affects how I interact with people. The people even in my own house. It's inside of me. James continues. In verse 2, you desire, but you do not have. You desire, but you do not have. So you have conflict because you want something that you don't have, whether it's justified in your mind or not. You want something that you don't have. He continues, you desire, but you do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. Now, I know that first part is a little bit shocking. So you kill? That seems kind of odd that James would use the word kill in this verse, since he's mainly talking to people who follow Christ, right? It sounds like he's basically accusing them of killing people because their desires aren't being met. Well, if you look into it and you study that word a little bit more and you take the context into account, you can say with pretty high certainty that he isn't literally talking about killing, like murdering someone. He's exaggerating a point about hurting someone out of this deep, envious desire for something that you don't have. What happens a lot in family life. Sometimes there's things that you want so badly. And remember, we're not all talking about material things. There's things that you want so badly that you're willing to hurt the people that you love the most in order to get them. I want this kind of life. I want people to see me this way. I want to have the perfect family image with my trophy wife and my adorable model children and my cute little dog and my little stick figure family on the back of my SUV. I want all that, right? We have these images, whatever it is for you, whatever the object or the image or the reputation or the level of status, the level of comfort or the approval of others. I'll finally be happy when I have what? I'll finally be at peace. I'll finally arrive somewhere. I'll finally get to my goal. I'll finally get what I want when, and it usually involves other people, when they start acting right. And when those desires and those expectations aren't met, what happens? Conflict is bound to happen. And the whole time that you're arguing and you're being frustrated and you're telling yourself, man, the problem is them. But James is telling us the problem is you. You want something and you're not getting it, so you're desperately trying to get it one way or another. It's hard, isn't it? It's hard to accept. I told you, James doesn't pull any punches. For example, let's say that you're about to confront someone in your family about a frustration you have. What if you stopped either before you start getting into the argument or maybe even during, and you just stopped and you just said, wait a minute, you know what part of the problem is here? I'm not getting what I want. You just stopped out of nowhere. I know, I got it. Part of the problem here is that I'm not getting what I want. Then imagine if the other person did the same thing. And they stopped and they said, I'm not really getting what I want either. I'm not saying that this would address the entire problem or that other issues shouldn't be worked through, because they definitely should in the right way. It's just that not getting what I want is the root of the conflict, and so we should start there. What would change if something like this took place in your home? What would change? I mean, it sounds like it would help, right? It sounds, man, like this would be a great idea to disarm arguments and change the way we communicate. So the question is, why do we not do this? Right? Why is this kind of rare? Seems easy. Well, if it were really easy, everybody would be doing it. We wouldn't have problems if it was easy. It's harder than you think because it's a really unnatural reaction to basically blame yourself when you're in the middle of an argument. Does that sound crazy to anybody else? You're arguing and you're in the middle, you just blame yourself. Turn it on yourself. Think about your marriage, if you're married here or if you're engaged or dating someone. See, when you were single, now nobody get too excited about that, okay? When you were single, you could do whatever you want. You could do it whenever you wanted, and you could have things just how you wanted them. And if it didn't work out, you just move or change your roommate or you just get a place by yourself, and you were the king or the queen of your kingdom, right? And you could just have your way in everything. And we enjoyed that. But then you got married. And then you got attached to someone who oftentimes wants different things than you. And this produces conflict, to say the least. Now, let's try a little exercise with our married or our engaged couples in the room. If that's you, if you're married or you're with somebody, think of what you're currently arguing about or fussing with each other about? Just take a minute, like if you had a fight this morning or maybe yesterday or just any point. What are you currently arguing about? Just think about it. Some of you know immediately, like, yes, it was today. Others maybe have to think for a minute. It's kind of smooth. But if you're not having any disagreements, just think of that last serious argument or fight about something that really bothers you. Now, take a look at this circle on the screen. Okay, let's imagine that this is a pie chart of the total amount of fault in creating this conflict that you're imagining or that you're remembering, maybe from this morning. Just this is the total amount. This is 100% of the fault. Now, I want you in your mind to look at that circle and draw the sliver of the pie that represents your percentage of fault or blame. Just try that. Just kind of like, wherever it would be. Now, I bet many of us didn't draw much of a slice at all. Maybe more like this. Maybe like that. Is that what many of us maybe would draw about that conflict? Maybe 2%? Why? Why do we only do that? Well, because if you own a slice, then you have to be nice. That's the rule. And we don't want to do that. As soon as you own part of the problem, well, the temperature drops and the arguing and the fighting and the frustration and the tension goes down. As soon as I own up to a slice of the pie, I have to focus not on your slice, but on mine. And I'd rather blame you. You never, or you always. You know, those type of statements, those are, by the way, just as a side note, those are really toxic statements in a relationship. Just doing all the counseling stuff that I do, I always tell people, don't make those statements. You never and you always, because we know that's not true. It's not never and it's not always. And it just makes people defensive. But if I can do that, if I can point at you and say, you never do this, then I'm on the moral high ground because the problem is you. But I don't feel so high up on that high ground when the problem is also me. And that, my friends, is where growth can happen. When we admit that we have a role to play in the problem. And that's where Jesus can move closer and closer to the center of our homes, especially when it comes to conflict. There is power in humility and weakness, especially when we approach conflict and especially with members of our family. There's power. There's life-giving, Christ-like power in humility and weakness and mutual submission. And I know there's an objection, but hey, wait, he promised, they promised, we had an agreement. I understand, and that's hard. But it's not really any different. It's basically, I want you to keep your promise because I'm not getting what I want. And you might say, it's not fair. And I get it. But have you noticed that we only play the it's not fair card when we're on the losing end? You ever notice that? You don't get mad and upset and pound your steering wheel when you get the front parking spot at Walmart. Right? Say, it's not fair. The other people, I get to park here, and other people have to park in the back. It's not fair. Anybody ever done that before? No. What do we do instead? Oh, thank you, Lord, for the front spot. A favor is upon me today, and I'm living the blessed life, right? While somebody who can barely walk is down in the another zip code trying to park. But the Lord's favor is upon me. Thank you, God. Because why? Because I'm the center of things. God blesses me. It doesn't matter at what expense. See, fairness ended in the Garden of Eden. So life is not fair. Even when it's hard and it means giving up your rights, if you're willing to admit your part, despite what you deserve, despite what she promised, despite how many times he told you he'd change, still part of the problem is that you want something from them and you're not getting what you want. That's what James said. And if you start doing this, and if you start shifting that mindset, you'll probably realize that your share of the pie is bigger than you thought. But then in the second half of verse 2, James makes this shift, and he starts bringing in that vertical aspect of a relationship with God into the equation. So let's check it out. In verse 2, the second half of verse 2, you do not have because you do not ask God. You do not have because you do not ask God. Now, listen, if you're not a committed follower of Jesus, up until this point, everything that we've talked about, you can go home, you can give it a try, and you can see how it goes. But this verse right here, this really applies to you if you claim to follow Jesus. For example, how about when you've been wronged or you've been hurt, instead of starting an argument or doing something that gets them back and gets justice for what they've done wrong, even if you feel justified, even if it seems like that's really what should happen, what if instead you tried telling God about what you want? What if you went to him first? God, I want my husband to take more initiative in our home. God, I want my parents to get off my back. God, I want my children to listen to me. God, I want my children to call me more. I never get to talk to them. God, I want my daughter to break up with that idiot guy. Tell God what you want. But isn't that our last resort a lot of times? We try to make everything work, and we try to control situations and organize things and plan out things, and then we say, oh yeah, and God, help me do what I'm wanting to do here. Help it work out the way that I see. It's hard. Because James tells us just a few verses later that God invites us to come to him in humility. He wants us to come to him first. In James 4, verse 8, if you skip down, he says, come near to God, and what's going to happen? He will come near to you. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. He will lift you up. He sees your heart. He sees what you want. He knows what you need, and he wants all of us to come to him. So before you try to get something from someone else, have you told God about your desires? Father, I want this and I'm not getting it. I have this desire, Lord. I'm turning it over to you. If you haven't done something like that, I get it. It might just be because you're so mad. And so you've closed off that part of your life. I get it, but it's time to open up again. Even if you are a praying person, you've probably been tempted to pray prayers like, change her, change him, fix him. Make them do the stuff that I think they should do. I've prayed, anybody admit to that? I've prayed prayers like that. Change them, Lord. They're bad. They're doing wrong. Make them do what I want. Make them do what you want them to do. But fix them, Lord. Just smite them, O mighty smiter. Smite. Have you ever thought that maybe you're not getting what you want out of someone because they don't have it in them to give you? There's a number of situations that I could talk about even in my own life, but just one small one is my relationship with my grandmother, who has gone on to be with the Lord. But I remember growing up, and we didn't live around her, because my grandfather had died when I was 1 or 2, and I didn't know him, and so she was in my life at certain points and vacations and visits and things, but I always had an expectation because I didn't have really grandparents in my life, and I wanted her to be my grandma, and I had an image in my mind. I had an expectation and a standard of how she's going to take care of me and spoil me and tell me all kinds of amazing things and share wisdom with me about her life. And I didn't get hardly any of that. I got a lot of pain and frustration and brokenness. And you know what kills me now is so many times, even into my young adult life, every time I was around her, I would set the bar way up here, and I'd have an expectation about what I want from her, and every single time she would fall short. Every single time. But I would never change. I would keep expecting that. And it finally hit me that all these things that I'm wanting out of her, she does not have. She's not able to give that to me. I need to release her from the pressure and from the debt that I feel like she owes me. You know what that's called? Forgiveness. Grace. And it took a long time. And I don't know that I ever really got there 100% before she passed away. But this is just an example of what I'm talking about. What if that person that keeps letting you down doesn't have it or doesn't know about it, hasn't tapped into whatever it is that you need? Some of us have been trying to wring something out of our spouses that we knew they didn't have even when we met them or married them. But we thought that somehow they would just change one day. That we'll just work on that and it'll be fine, we'll be happy. So is that their issue or my issue? Think about it. Is that their thing or my thing? James says, you do not have because you do not ask God. You might say, well, I do ask God and still nothing changes. Well, then go back to James 4, verse 3. He says, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. Basically, you ask with motives that are self-centered. You know, if you really pray, if you really wrestle with God about what's going on in your heart and what those desires are that James talked about, what it is you're really wanting, he is going to hear you, and he's going to answer you, but it's going to be in his way and in his timing. And that's where the trust factor comes in. Do you trust him enough to wait on him? Because we know that his timing is perfect, and we know that he's a good father who takes care of us. Jesus himself assured us of this. Just look at one more scripture today, leaving James and going over to Matthew to look at the words of Jesus. Matthew 7:7, he says, keep on asking, and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking, and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be opened to you. Keep on. I love the New Living Translation here because this really captures the essence of what Jesus is saying, to keep on knocking and asking and seeking. For everyone who asks receives. Everyone who seeks finds. And to everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. And then in verse 9, he makes it real practical. He says, you parents, if your children ask for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead? Or if they ask for a fish, do you give them a snake? Of course not. So if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask him? Go talk to God first about what you need and about what you want. You might even find that your motives change, or how you see the conflict might change. You might even become at peace with the idea that my husband is not going to turn out the way that I thought he was or that I want him to. It's just not going to happen. Or my wife will never be that way. That might even happen where you come to terms with that. But will you take your desires to God? Will you take no for an answer? Will you own your part of the mess? Will I own my part of the mess? If so, then you'll be able to have a totally different kind of conversation. The one that removes the pressure that you've been putting on the other person to make you happy. So, I'd like to close today by asking you an offensive question. Sound good? You ready? I'm going to ask you an offensive question. Who is suffering because you aren't getting your way? Is that offensive enough? Who is suffering because you aren't getting your way? When I ask this question of myself, I at least know that it's my family. It's my kids. It's my wife. Who in your family feels the pressure to behave, or the pressure to stop, or the pressure to work harder, or be skinnier, or be smarter, or make more money? Who's feeling it? You know how we are. We say it's about them. I'm helping them. I'm helping them be a better person. But we really know it's about me. It's about me. The desires I have in me. What would happen in your family if no one felt like they constantly had to try to make you happy? You know, I was thinking about this even this morning, and I was thinking about yesterday. I was in the car, and I yelled at my kids and had a big lecture about the frustration I was having about them not picking up their stuff and how they're a mess. And I got onto them a lot. And, one of my kids was kind of crying and was like, I don't know if I can. I forget. I'll try. And, I stuck to my guns and said, well, you need to try because it's bad. And I thought about it later, and I'm like, man, that's a lot of pressure. And I don't know. It's not a perfect system. There's a balance, right? Because we want our kids to grow and mature, and we need to teach them to be disciplined. But am I adding undue pressure? Am I causing unnecessary conflict? When our kids are all different, and some of them are they remember things and they are very organized, and others are just like a Tasmanian devil, just everything. You can see everywhere they've been because they have a trail of cups and bowls and clothes and socks and underwear, and if you're a parent. And sometimes I lose my mind over that stuff, and I'm just wrestling with that. What is the root of that? What is the root of conflict? Is it that I just want my kids to be good people? I don't think so. I think there's a desire in me. There's a root in me that is putting undue pressure. And I think that's where sometimes a lot of us struggle. It's finding that balance. But we have to be aware. Awareness helps. Why am I doing this? What is my motivation here? Is it me or is it them? And we work through that. So what can you do today? Who can you reach out to? What can you make right? How can you bring peace? Maybe it's an email or phone call or text or just a conversation with somebody to begin to take that unnecessary pressure off of them. I'll be talking to my kids later today about that, about yesterday. So what I'm telling you isn't just some theory. I'm living it out. I'm wrestling with it myself, not like 8 years ago, like today. So what can you do? Why do you fight? Because there's something you want that you're not getting. In the ideal family, each person prays a prayer that's just a simple prayer that, God, do in me what you need to do in me. Before I try to squeeze out of the people that I love something that only you can give me. What only you can give. Isn't that how we mess that process up? I need something, and God can give it, but I don't go to him. I go to others and put the pressure. Make me happy. Fulfill this in me. And the Lord's there the whole time saying, I'm here, and I'll fulfill you, and I'll give you peace. But we've got to go to him. We've got to admit our slice of the pie. If we're ever going to find fulfillment, if we're ever going to find purpose, and if we're going to experience wholeness in our families with Jesus right in the middle. That's the call for today. Now next week, big week. I know it's Memorial Day weekend, but I hope you can join us for church because the next part of this series is such an important part. We're going to be talking about having a family vision. And we're going to ask that big picture question, what direction is my family going? I bet it's a question that the majority of our families have never sat around a table and asked, what direction are we going? We'll even have an extra special treat because my wife Gina will be up here with me to share some of our journey and what the Lord is putting on her heart. So I hope you can be here. Let's stand together. I'm just going to give you an opportunity, just where you're standing, to go to the Lord, to humble yourself, to bring your part of the pie to him, to bring your desires to him, to bring what you want. It's like the Father, our good Father is coming. If you picture him in your mind, just coming towards you saying, hey son, What is it that you want? What are your desires? Tell me. I'm your source. Tell me. Instead of trying to work it all out on your own and get it from people who can't give it to you. What is it that you want? How can I help? See, humility comes from God. He's the ultimate example of humility. He's grace and He's truth. So just go to Him right now. Whatever you're struggling with, whatever the conflict is, whoever you're at odds with, or if you're struggling with your kids, or whatever the family dynamic is for you, the Lord is the one who can bring wholeness and healing. That's the place to start. What's the root? Lord, I pray, Holy Spirit, for revelation right now in our hearts, that you'd pull back the curtain on the root of some of this. What are those desires, Lord? Show us those areas of our hearts that are not surrendered to you, and reveal to us how we need to grow and change, maybe what conversations we need to have or what actions we need to take. Give us guidance for the path moving forward. And if we're not in any kind of big conflict or not having relational tension or things seem to be at peace, Lord, would you help us to be an example and a light to those that are struggling, that we'd be able to offer resources and help and just a shoulder to lean on. Pray for those that have that strength and that depth and have that peace in their lives, Lord, to give them opportunities to minister and to share and to bless and cover those that are in chaos or a storm right now. Reveal that, Lord, and draw us together as a church to be able to help one another, minister to needs, to be the true body of Christ, ministering to one another. We need you, Lord. Thank you for this season, for bringing us out of a very difficult time, and for setting us on a new path. You are doing something new. Let it be birthed here. Let it be birthed right here in this place. Holy Spirit, you're welcome. We just honor you. In Jesus' name, amen.